parking spaces can be accessible or not for many people with disabilities. It is essential to ensure that there is enough space for everyone, and that specific needs of people living with disabilities remain a central focus in the planning and development of parking spaces. This means recognizing that for people living with disabilities, having a safe and accessible space is a necessity, not just a convenience.
Accessibility is based on several factors: the number of spaces, the dimensions, length, width, and height, location of the spaces, the path of travel, including access aisle, and proximity to an accessible entrance.
Amit shows us an example of a well-designed accessible parking space. He can safely use the right side loading ramp to wheel out without fear of running into traffic. The space design of the access ramp also allows Amit to have enough turning space and move towards the curb ramp. Access aisles are an integral part of an accessible parking space and must be recognized in local bylaws as such. The accessible parking space is worth every dollar spent in ensuring that basic standards are met. In fact, this would be considered a great parking spot.
Rod is using a manual wheelchair, requiring a safe, accessible space close to his vehicle to safely transfer himself onto the driver's seat to fold and place his wheelchair back into the car. Now imagine the same situation if there was no access aisle, and someone had parked their car in the adjacent space instead. We also have Kyle, who does not use a ramp to exit his vehicle but needs a safe space to transfer himself from the chair to the lift and onto the wheelchair.
You can see that Vince had to use space in addition to the accessible aisle to maneuver his wheelchair. If Vince comes back to see another vehicle parked adjacent, he cannot get back into his vehicle without hurting himself or scratching the other car. And now look, such a great, thoughtful spot. It has a wide accessible aisle, safe path of travel to get to the ramp, and not in the blind spot of another vehicle. You can see that both Rod and Vince, parked on alternate sides of the accessible aisle, were able to safely exit their vehicle. Amazing, isn't it? And the view is great as well. Obstructions or lack of ramps resulting from others parking too close is also an important consideration. Here we have Kim, literally at the risk of falling off her wheelchair because of the following factors. No accessible aisle. The curb is too close and steep to the accessible space. Improperly designed curbs could result in injury. Wheelchair users need additional space to build up the momentum they need to get up the ramp. Kim is facing a really hard time making it back into her vehicle and ultimately had to rely on the assistance of others. This is very frustrating.
Marnie and Jeff can safely access the shops and services that they need because they have been able to find a great accessible parking space that has been designed to allow them to get from their vehicle to the curb safely and barrier-free.
Natasha's caregiver helps her come out of the rear loading van, but is blocked by another driver who is entering the parking lot. This is very risky. It is difficult to find an accessible aisle for rear loading vehicles. Suitable signage could be used besides specific parking spaces to inform other drivers to be more careful. Accessible aisles are a necessity for many, but their location is extremely important. This is a dangerous situation where the driver exiting the parking lot fails to see Zosha, who is trying to come out of the vehicle on the accessible aisle. It is great to have an accessible aisle, but it should not be on the busy side of the road. Finding adequate, designated accessible parking spaces remains an ongoing challenge for people living with disabilities. We know the difference that we can make together when we say yes to access.
Parking spots can be accessible or not. And to this end, we have brought together participants who are experts in the area and who themselves have lived the experience.
Nothing about us without us.